All right, let's dive into a country that really kind of defies expectations. Russia. Going deep into Wikipedia today, using it as our source material, unearthing all the really fascinating things about Russia's geography, history, people, and pretty much everything in between. Think of it as like a shortcut to becoming a Russia aficionado.
It's funny, most people think of Russia as like a European nation, but it's actually this transcontinental giant. I mean, it stretches across both Eastern Europe and North Asia, and it's the largest country on Earth, spanning an incredible 11 time zones. Can you imagine traveling across that expanse, essentially losing a whole day just by crossing the country?
That's more than a time zone headache. That's a whole time zone migraine. But I think what really gets me about Russia is its sheer diversity of landscapes. We're talking towering mountains like the Caucasus, which are home to Mount Elbrus, the highest peak in Europe.
Right.
And then you have these vast, seemingly endless Siberian taiga forests. And then even subtropical regions along the Black Sea. It's almost like several different countries rolled into one.
That's a great way to put it. And let's not forget the abundance of water. Lake Baikal, nestled in the heart of Siberia, is the deepest lake on the planet. And get this, it holds a staggering 1/5 of the world's freshwater reserves. That's more than all the Great Lakes in North America combined.
Wow, and talk about a hidden treasure. When I think about Russia, I'm always drawn to its dramatic history. It's this epic tale of empires rising and falling, invasions, revolutions, powerful rulers, Vikings, Mongols, czars, you name it. Russia has seen it.
So let's start at the very beginning. We're talking about the emergence of the East Slavic states way back in the 9th century. And this is where those seafaring adventurers, the Vikings, or Varangians as they were known in the East, enter the picture. According to the primary chronicle, a Varangian named Rurik was invited to rule the city of Novgorod in 862. And this is kind of considered the traditional starting point of the Russian state.
So these Vikings weren't just raiding and pillaging, they were actually laying the foundation for a nation.
Precisely. And Rurik's successor Oleg set his sights on the south, conquering Kiev in 882, and establishing it as the capital of a new state, Kievan Rus'. It's fascinating to consider how this early Viking influence shaped the course of Russian history.
And from this foundation, Kievan Rus' really blossomed. Under rulers like Vladimir the Great and Yaroslav the Wise, it experienced a golden age. This period saw the adoption of Orthodox Christianity in 988, a defining moment in Russian culture and identity. We also see the creation of the Russkaya Pravda, which was Kievan Rus' first legal code.
That's right. And the Russkaya Pravda wasn't just a set of laws, it reflected a growing sophistication in the legal and social structure of Kievan Rus'. Think of it as like a stepping stone towards a more organized and centralized state.
But as with many empires, internal strife and external pressures eventually led to fragmentation. Kievan Rus' broke apart into these rival principalities, which sadly left them vulnerable to, you guessed it, the Mongol invasion in the 13th century. These Mongols, later known as the Golden Horde or Tatars, ruled over much of what is now Russia for over 2 centuries. This period, often referred to as the Tatar Yoke, had a profound impact on Russian society and political development.
Yeah, Mongol rule was undoubtedly harsh. It isolated Russia from Western Europe, stunted economic growth, and fostered a more autocratic style of governance. But it also had some surprising consequences. For instance, the Mongols inadvertently strengthened the position of the Grand Duchy of Moscow, which skillfully managed its relationship with the Golden Horde and gradually rose to prominence.
So out of the ashes of Mongol domination, a new power center emerges. And then we have Ivan the Great, who finally cast off Mongol control in the late 15th century. He united much of northern Rus' under Moscow's rule, laying the foundation for a unified Russian state.
Ivan the Great was a shrewd politician and a skilled military leader. His marriage to Sophia Palaeologina, the niece of the last Byzantine emperor, further enhanced Moscow's prestige, linking it to the legacy of the fallen Roman Empire. He also adopted the title of Tsar, derived from Caesar, reflecting his ambitions to position Moscow as the Third Rome, the rightful heir to the Roman and Byzantine empires.
Feels like he was playing the long game. And then, of course, we have his infamous grandson Ivan the Terrible, who officially crowned himself the first Tsar of Russia in 1547. He's a figure shrouded in contradiction, right? Expansion and modernization intertwined with absolute brutality.
Ivan the Terrible was a complex and paradoxical ruler. He expanded the Tsardom's territory, significantly pushing eastward into Siberia, which opened up vast new lands and resources, but also came at a high cost in terms of human suffering. He implemented reforms to centralize the government and modernize the military, but he also unleashed a reign of terror known as the Oprichnina, targeting perceived enemies real or imagined with ruthless violence. This period of repression had a lasting impact on Russian society, instilling a deep fear of state power and fostering a culture of suspicion and paranoia.
His legacy is a fascinating one, a mix of vision and tyranny. And after the tumultuous reign of Ivan the Terrible, a new dynasty emerged in the 17th century, the Romanovs.
The Romanovs, a dynasty that would rule Russia for over 300 years. Their reign saw Russia transform from a largely isolated and medieval state into a major European power. One of the most significant figures of this dynasty was Peter the Great, who became Tsar in 1682.
Peter the Great the Tsar, who famously traveled to Europe in disguise, eager to learn from the West and bring back ideas to modernize Russia.
He was obsessed with westernization, determined to drag Russia, as some might say, kicking and screaming into the modern era. He reorganized the government, modernized the army and navy, introduced new technologies, and even mandated changes in dress and appearance, much to the chagrin of the old guard.
And let's not forget his most ambitious project, the construction of St. Petersburg, his window to the West. It's an incredible city built on swampland through sheer willpower and a staggering loss of life.
It's a testament to both Peter's vision and the immense human cost of his ambitions. St. Petersburg became a symbol of Russia's newfound status as a European power, but it also highlighted the growing divide between the elites who embraced westernization and the masses who clung to traditional ways.
That tension between tradition and modernity seems to be a recurring theme in Russian history.
It certainly is. And this tension continued to play out under subsequent rulers, including Catherine the Great, who came to power in 1762. She's often remembered as an enlightened despot, a patron of the arts and sciences, but she was also a ruthless pragmatist who expanded the Russian Empire through conquest and shrewd diplomacy.
Under Catherine, Russia gained vast territories, including Crimea, a region that continues to be a source of conflict even today. She also had to deal with the Pugachev Rebellion, a massive peasant uprising that challenged the very foundations of the Tsarist regime.
The Pugachev Rebellion exposed the deep social and economic inequalities that plagued Russian society. It served as a stark reminder of the limits of autocratic rule and the potential for popular unrest.
So we see this ongoing struggle between the rulers and the elites and the masses. And then, of course, there's the Napoleonic Wars, a turning point not just for Russia, but for Europe as a whole.
Napoleon's invasion of Russia in 1812 is one of the most dramatic events in European history. His Grand Armée, boasting over 600,000 soldiers, marched into Russia expecting a swift victory. But they underestimated the vastness of the country, the harshness of the Russian winter, and the resilience of the Russian people.
The Russian army employed a scorched earth strategy, retreating eastward and burning everything in their path, leaving Napoleon's troops with dwindling supplies and facing a brutal winter. It's no wonder they called it General Winter.
Napoleon's dreams of conquest were shattered. His army was decimated, retreating in disarray. The victory over Napoleon bolstered Russia's sense of national pride and its status as a major European power. But it also masked the growing internal problems that would eventually lead to revolution.
It's like a forest fire. It might clear out the underbrush, but it also leaves the ground fertile for new challenges to sprout. And those challenges certainly did sprout in the 19th century. We see the rise of social movements, demands for reform, and the looming specter of revolution.
The Crimean War in the 1850s exposed the weaknesses of the Russian military and highlighted the need for modernization. The emancipation of the serfs in 1861, while a necessary step towards a more just society, created new social and economic problems as millions of former serfs struggled to adapt to their newfound freedom.
And then, of course, we have the cataclysm of World War I, which proved to be the final nail in the coffin for the Tsarist regime.
Russia entered World War I ill-prepared for the scale and brutality of modern warfare. Military defeats, economic hardship, and political instability fueled popular discontent, leading to the February Revolution in 1917, which forced Tsar Nicholas II to abdicate, ending centuries of Romanov rule.
And so begins one of the most transformative and tumultuous chapters in Russian history, the Soviet era.
The February Revolution led to the establishment of a provisional government, but it was short-lived. In October 1917, the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, seized power in a second revolution, promising peace, land, and bread to the war-weary and impoverished masses.
And they certainly delivered change, albeit not always the kind they promised. The Bolsheviks, who later renamed themselves communists, embarked on a radical experiment in social engineering, establishing the Soviet Union, a socialist state that would eventually encompass 15 republics.
Lenin's death in 1924 led to a power struggle from which Joseph Stalin emerged victorious. Under Stalin's brutal dictatorship, the Soviet Union underwent rapid industrialization and collectivization, but at a horrific human cost. Millions perished in purges, forced labor camps, and man-made famines.
It's a dark and chilling period, a stark reminder of the dangers of totalitarian regimes.
But the Soviet Union also played a pivotal role in defeating Nazi Germany in World War II. The Eastern Front was the bloodiest theater of the war, and the Soviet people endured unimaginable suffering. Their victory over the Nazis came at a staggering cost, but it solidified the Soviet Union's status as a global superpower.
It's a complex and contradictory legacy, heroism, and sacrifice intertwined with oppression and tyranny. And then, of course, we have the Cold War, a decades-long geopolitical rivalry between the Soviet Union and the West.
The Cold War was a period of intense ideological competition, military buildups, proxy wars, and the constant threat of nuclear annihilation. It shaped the global political landscape for nearly half a century and left an enduring legacy on international relations.
But the Soviet system, despite its apparent strength, was ultimately unsustainable. Economic stagnation, political repression, and the burdens of the arms race took their toll. By the 1980s, under the leadership of Mikhail Gorbachev, the Soviet Union embarked on a path of reform known as perestroika and glasnost, aiming to restructure the economy and introduce greater political openness.
These reforms, while well-intentioned, ultimately unleashed forces that couldn't be controlled. The Soviet Union, weakened by internal contradictions and facing growing nationalist movements within its republics, collapsed in 1991, dissolving into 15 independent states.
It was the end of an era, a seismic shift that reshaped the world order.
And for Russia, it marked the beginning of a new chapter, a tumultuous transition from communism to capitalism, from a one-party state to a fledgling democracy.
It's a period marked by both hope and disillusionment, as Russia grappled with the challenges of building a new society while confronting the ghosts of its past. And that brings us to contemporary Russia, a country still in search of its identity on the world stage.
But before we delve into the complexities of contemporary Russia, let's take a moment to appreciate the incredible diversity of its people and culture. After all, Russia is more than just its political system or its economic performance. It's a tapestry woven from the threads of countless cultures, languages, and traditions.
You're absolutely right. It's easy to get caught up in the grand narratives of history and politics, but it's the people who truly make a nation what it is. And Russia, with its vast expanse and its rich multicultural heritage, is a testament to that.
Imagine this. Russia is home to over 190 different ethnic groups, each with its own unique language, customs, and beliefs. You have Russians, Tatars, Ukrainians, Bashkirs, Chechens, and many more, all contributing to the rich tapestry of Russian society.
It's mind-boggling to think about the sheer diversity of cultures coexisting within one country. It must make for some fascinating interactions and cultural exchanges.
Absolutely. While Russian is the official language, there are over 100 other languages spoken throughout the country. And let's not forget about religion. Russia is officially a secular state, but religion plays a significant role in the lives of many Russians.
You've got Orthodox Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Judaism, and various indigenous belief systems. It's truly a melting pot of faiths.
And this religious diversity is reflected in the stunning array of religious architecture found across Russia. Think of the iconic onion domes of Orthodox churches, the elegant minarets of mosques, the serene beauty of Buddhist temples, and the understated grandeur of synagogues.
And let's not forget about the food. I'm a huge fan of Russian cuisine. You've got hearty dishes like borscht, those delicious dumplings called pelmeni, and of course the national drink vodka, which has a long and storied history in Russian culture.
Russian cuisine is a reflection of the country's vastness and its diverse cultural influences. From the hearty stews of the north to the flavorful pilafs of the south, from the delicate pastries of the west to the robust dumplings of the east. Russian food is a culinary adventure waiting to be explored.
And then there's the art, the literature, the music. Russia has produced some of the world's greatest writers, composers, and artists. We're talking Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Tchaikovsky, Rachmaninoff, Repin Kandinsky. The list goes on and on.
Russian literature in particular has had a profound impact on world literature. Works like War and Peace, Crime and Punishment, and The Brothers Karamazov delve into the depths of the human soul, exploring themes of love loss, faith, guilt, and redemption.
It seems like Russians have a knack for exploring the big questions, for grappling with the complexities of the human condition.
Indeed. And this intellectual depth is also reflected in their contributions to science and technology.
Russia has a long and impressive history of scientific innovation. They were pioneers in space exploration, launching the first satellite Sputnik into orbit in 1957 and sending the first human Yuri Gagarin into space in 1961.
And let's not forget their contributions to mathematics, physics, chemistry, and medicine. From Mendeleev's periodic table to Pavlov's groundbreaking work on classical conditioning, Russian scientists have made lasting contributions to our understanding of the world.
So we've got this rich tapestry of cultures, a long and dramatic history, and a legacy of scientific and artistic achievement. But what about contemporary Russia? What challenges does it face today? What opportunities lie ahead?
Contemporary Russia is a complex and fascinating country, a mix of old and new tradition and modernity, hope and disillusionment. It's a country that's still trying to find its footing in a rapidly changing world.
It seems like Russia is constantly in the news these days, often portrayed as a geopolitical rival to the West. What's the reality on the ground?
Well, it's important to remember that Russia is a vast and diverse country with a complex political and social landscape. It's a country that's been through immense changes in recent decades, and it's still grappling with the legacy of its past.
I think one of the biggest challenges for outsiders is understanding the nuances of Russian politics. It's often portrayed as a simple dichotomy, Putin versus the West, but it's much more complicated than that.
Absolutely. The political system in Russia is a semi-presidential republic with Vladimir Putin as the dominant political figure for over 2 decades. He's a complex and enigmatic leader, often described as a strong man who's restored stability to Russia after the chaos of the 1990s.
But his critics argue that he's undermined democratic institutions, suppressed dissent, and concentrated power in the hands of a small elite.
There's no doubt that freedom of speech and political opposition are limited in Russia today. And the annexation of Crimea in 2014 and the ongoing conflict in Ukraine have further strained relations with the West.
It seems like Russia is caught between a desire to assert itself on the world stage and the need to address its internal challenges.
The Russian economy is heavily reliant on oil and gas exports, which has made it vulnerable to fluctuations in global energy prices, and more recently to sanctions imposed by the West.
Those sanctions have definitely had an impact, haven't they? It seems like ordinary Russians are feeling the pinch.
Yeah, the sanctions, coupled with economic mismanagement and corruption, have led to economic stagnation, rising inflation, and declining living standards for many Russians.
But despite these challenges, there's also a sense of resilience, a deep pride in Russian culture and history.
The Russian people have endured a lot throughout their history. They've faced invasions, revolutions, wars, famines, and political repression, yet they've always managed to persevere. They have a strong sense of community and a deep appreciation for their cultural heritage.
It's that spirit that really fascinates me about Russia. It's a country that's been through so much, yet it continues to evolve and adapt.
And that's what makes it so intriguing. It's a country of contradictions, of complexities of possibilities. It's a country that defies easy categorization. And that's why it's so important to engage with it, to understand its history, its culture, and its people, to see beyond the headlines and to appreciate its nuances.
I couldn't agree more. It's about moving beyond stereotypes and embracing the complexities.
Exactly. Russia is not a monolithic entity. It's a vibrant and dynamic society with a rich and multifaceted culture. It's a country that deserves our attention, our curiosity, and our respect. And honestly, it's hard to pick just one thing that surprised me the most about Russia. But what really strikes me is how Russia has this unique ability to just constantly reinvent itself. It's a country that has faced so many challenges throughout its history. Invasions, revolutions, wars, political upheavals, yet it always seems to emerge in its own way stronger.
It's like they've developed this national resilience that's almost hard to grasp.
Yeah, and that resilience is reflected not just in their history, but also in their art, their literature, their music. There's this underlying strength, the sense of perseverance that seems woven into the very fabric of their culture.
Makes you wonder what the future holds for Russia. Given its vast natural resources, its strategic location, the complicated relationship with the West, what role do you think it'll play in the 21st century?
That's the question, isn't it? Russia is at a crossroads, facing both these immense challenges and these tantalizing opportunities. Will it embrace a more democratic path or continue down a more authoritarian route? Can it overcome its economic dependence on oil and gas and diversify its economy? Will it find a way to bridge the gap with the West, or will tensions continue to escalate?
The stakes are high, not just for Russia, but for the entire world.
Precisely. Russia is a key player on the global stage. A nuclear superpower, a permanent member of the UN Security Council. Its actions have far-reaching consequences.
I think one of the most important takeaways from this deep dive is that understanding Russia is crucial for understanding the world we live in today. It's not just about politics and geopolitics, it's about appreciating the cultural richness, the historical depth, the human stories that make up this fascinating and often misunderstood country.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's about seeing beyond the stereotypes and engaging with Russia in all its complexity. It's about recognizing that Russia is not a monolith, but a nation of individuals with diverse perspectives, dreams, and aspirations.
It's about listening to those voices and engaging in meaningful dialogue. It's about recognizing that we have more in common than we might think.
And ultimately, it's about fostering greater understanding and empathy, which is more important now than ever before.
So there you have it, a glimpse into the heart of Russia. We hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and given you a new appreciation for this complex and ever-evolving nation. And remember, this is just the beginning. There's so much more to explore, to learn, to discover.
Keep asking questions, keep challenging your assumptions, keep diving deep. The world is full of fascinating stories just waiting to be uncovered.
Until next time, keep exploring and keep those minds open.
And honestly, it's hard to pick just one thing that surprised me the most about Russia. But what really strikes me is how Russia has this unique ability to just constantly reinvent itself. You know, it's a country that has faced so many challenges throughout its history: invasions, revolutions, wars, political upheavals. Yet it always seems to emerge in its own way stronger.
It's like they've developed this national resilience that's almost hard to grasp.
Yeah, and that resilience is reflected not just in their history, but also in their art, their literature, their music. There's this underlying strength, a sense of perseverance that seems woven into the very fabric of their culture.
Makes you wonder what the future holds for Russia. I mean, given its vast natural resources, its strategic location, its complicated relationship with the West, what role do you think it'll play in the 21st century?
That's the question, isn't it? Russia is at a crossroads, facing both these immense challenges and these tantalizing opportunities. Will it embrace a more democratic path or continue down a more authoritarian route? Can it overcome its economic dependence on oil and gas and diversify its economy? Will it find a way to bridge the gap with the West, or will tensions continue to escalate?
The stakes are high, not just for Russia, but for the entire world.
Precisely. Russia is a key player on the global stage. A nuclear superpower, a permanent member of the UN Security Council. Its actions have far-reaching consequences.
I think one of the most important takeaways from this deep dive is that understanding Russia is crucial for understanding the world we live in today. It's not just about politics and geopolitics, it's about appreciating the cultural richness, the historical depth, the human stories that make up this fascinating and often misunderstood country.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's about seeing beyond the stereotypes and engaging with Russia in all its complexity. It's about recognizing that Russia is not a monolith, but a nation of individuals with diverse perspectives, dreams, and aspirations.
It's about listening to those voices and engaging in meaningful dialogue. It's about recognizing that we have more in common than we might think.
And ultimately, it's about fostering greater understanding and empathy, which is more important now than ever before.
So there you have it, a glimpse into the heart of Russia. We hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and given you a new appreciation for this complex and ever-evolving nation. And remember, this is just the beginning. There's so much more to explore, to learn, to discover.
Keep asking questions, keep challenging your assumptions, keep diving deep. The world is full of fascinating stories just waiting to be uncovered.
Until next time, keep exploring and keep those minds open.